Extensive changes are coming for the state's criminal justice system through the new set of laws passed earlier this month, including steps to reduce racial bias in the justice system, which critics say have disproportionately impacted people of color. Racial bias made national news this week after 2 black men were arrested for trespassing at a Philadelphia Starbucks. Leaders at both the police department and the national chain have apologized. And next month, Starbucks plans to train nearly 175,000 employees to try and prevent future discrimination in its stores. Back in Massachusetts, as legislators work their way through the budget process and money proposed to help implement criminal justice reform, we wanted to understand the current way that racial bias is sometimes addressed in this region, and that's through training. As project director of the Healing Racism Institute, Waleska Lugo-DeJesús works to help people understand the root causes of racism and provide strategies for businesses and individuals working to overcome these prejudices. We spoke in the studio.
I would take it in different tiers. Stereotype to me is kind of the joke, where people think that they can generalize a group of individuals based on some thoughts that they have. That takes you onto a prejudice kind of thought. And then it leads to a bias where that's where the danger lies. What I want to say is that we all carry biases. It's really important to understand why we carry them, and most of it is because of society's condition.
And so looking at those conditions, I think oftentimes people will think about racial bias in terms of white people being the majority group, discriminating against a minority group. But what you're saying about society, it's much broader than that then.
It is much broader. Our work within the Healing Racism Institute is just that, to have a conversation so that people understand where they are in the spectrum, kind of, we like to say, elevating people's consciousness, so that you not only understand yourself, but there's 4 forms of racism. There's internalized racism, there's interpersonal racism, there's institutional racism, and there's structural racism. And so if you don't understand yourself, what you have internalized as a person of color or not, your interactions with other people might be based out of fear because of the unknown.
With that interpersonal racism, when you're working with people, talking to people, where do you start with them so that they can even begin to recognize, okay, am I coming from a racial bias in doing X, Y, or Z?
That's a difficult question. I would say that because we are all at different levels, it's really important to understand the differences between the different forms of racism, but then also the danger that lies within the action. So you can carry biases and you can carry prejudice as long as you don't use that as action to harm other people.
When you talk about those dangers, you mean more than just physical violence, I assume?
Yes, yeah, microaggression. You know, as a person of color, I remember going into places and not being served just because of the color of my skin. And I have other stories that, could be very difficult to relive. And so there are things that trigger me, and I constantly check myself within that because I know that could also cause me to react in a way that other people might not understand.
So then do you find yourself as a person avoiding certain circumstances or places? That doesn't really seem fair to you.
Yeah, I'm not one to avoid, I'm more one to provoke, but that is only because it comes with years of experience. So I think the most important thing is for each person to understand that we need to educate ourselves with history, which is the most important, so that things that occur don't continue to occur, to understand oppression and how that affects every person, not only the person of color, because if you walk in a world where you fear interacting with other people just because they're different from you, or because you have a curiosity that you don't dare engage in that conversation, to your point previously, then, what's the fun in actually living and learning from other people?
I know that through your work, you're out in the community a lot, yes, interacting with people, hearing from people. Is there a pattern that you've noticed in terms of where racial bias shows up more often in this region?
Yeah, so I would say in this region is the same circumstance of around the world and with every person. Again, we all carry biases. There is a certain level of guilt and shame when people realize that, oh, maybe this is within me, or maybe this is, this is what my family member meant when they said this, and how do I address that, right? But this is a larger conversation. I would say if there is anything that is beneficial to what happens or what we see and hear in the news, sadly on a daily basis sometimes, is that the incidents that are occurring because of social media now can no longer be hidden. And so what that does, it sparks a larger community conversation about the issues, about oppression, about the different forms of racism, and mostly structural, because what happened recently, you have your policies and procedures as an institution, but then there's other unwritten rules that people just act on based on their own prejudice or bias.
Recognizing that social media helps to draw awareness immediately sometimes to these situations, do you think that that is making racial tensions more severe because there are people coming in support of some folks and then maybe against some folks, and they see it all instantaneously?
I think it's important to feel empowered with it. Negative or positive, again, it's shedding light on a conversation that people shy away from and avoid, but it also gives the opportunity to see different sides of the story. And so you learn from those experiences. And
what about a tip for an onlooker? There were people who were in that cafe watching these two gentlemen be arrested, and it was pretty quiet in the cafe based on the video that I watched. What would you say to someone how would you help someone who's watching that situation to speak up maybe and help?
Yeah, so the intervention is really the part where either you're empowered or you're not. I heard some people say, but they didn't do anything, they were just sitting there. And but then again, you have that the action is already happening where they're being arrested. So you're also trying to be careful. So I guess my tip would be, or my voice would be, that people find their own voices within that, as long as you're not in harm's way. So if you can speak up and just say, look, I personally saw that there was nothing happening that was negative. That's not really all you can do if they're on their way out the door.
Well, I appreciate you coming in today to take some time to talk with us.
Thank you, Carrie.